let me just try to adjust the screen and then we'll just start.
This PDF has been shared, I guess, on the group.
The PDF will probably be shared at the end of the session. Okay. I just need to adjust my stream, so give me a moment.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to cover the overview of valuation under the Companies Act 2013. Now, if you look at the Companies Act, the section 247 talks about valuation by registered valuers. What it says is where a valuation is required to be made in respect of any property, stocks, shares, debentures, securities, or goodwill, or any other assets, hereinafter referred to as the assets, or net worth of a company or its liabilities under the provisions of this Act. Now let's think of this for a moment. The valuation is required to be made for property, which let's assume is land and building or plant and machinery. It could also be, all of you, I think most of you will know that property also refers to goods. But for the moment, let's assume property is land and building, plant and machinery. And after that, we have stocks, shares, debentures, securities. All of these financial assets, quite clearly financial assets, or goodwill. Now, what is goodwill? Let me ask, let's say, Ashish Jain. I will ask you questions from time to time. So this is just to make sure that people are listening in and that I'm also getting feedback as to whether people are okay with what I'm saying or not. So Ashish, can you just unmute and tell me what do you think is goodwill? What type of an asset is it?
Is intangible assets which help the organization to earn in the future.
Okay, great, Ashish. Thank you for that. Or any other assets hereinafter referred to as the assets or net worth of a company. So net worth, like all of us know, is including it's the net of the assets minus liabilities, right? And or its liabilities under the provisions of this Act. So let me just ask Chakka Kumar. I've got the pronunciation right, I hope. So what do you think? Why do we need to value liabilities of a company?
Liabilities of the company also plays a very important role in arriving at the net worth of the company.
Okay. Okay, great. We'll carry on. This is just to make sure you're on.
Yeah.
And did I get your pronunciation right? Your name?
Yeah, yes, correct.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
It shall be valued by a person having such qualifications and experience and registered as a valuer. So qualifications and experience will be defined in the valuation rules. Registered as a valuer, the method of valuation is what we'll also cover. On such terms and conditions as may be prescribed and appointed by the audit committee or in its absence by the board of directors of a company, of that company. Okay, so moving on. The valuer appointed under subsection 1 shall make an impartial, true and fair valuation of any assets which may require to be valued. Okay, in some cases, I just can't see the names of people at the moment. Let me just try to change my screen view and figure out. I have somebody with the picture of river, for instance. I can't figure out who that is. Just give me a moment. Let me try.
It's me, sir, Jigar Shah.
Okay, Jigar. So can you tell me impartial, true and fair valuation of any assets which may require to be valued? What do you think this means? Impartial, true and fair valuation of assets.
I would say it should be the value where if it had been exchanged or transfer with some other party, then it should be at a fair market value. So it should not be prejudiced because of any relationship or related party transactions.
Correct. And Jigar, are you a chartered accountant?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So from your name, it sounds like you're a CA. So that's why I thought I would just ask you that.
Thanks a lot, sir.
So let me just ask you, Jigar. Now this impartial, true, fair valuation of assets which may require to be valued. Mostly people come to us and tell us that they want to get a certain valuation done at a certain value. They've pre-indicated the value. So do you think that we can do an impartial, true and fair valuation in that case?
In some cases, yes, there will be restriction because client always expects something, for XYZ reason. But I would suggest, first of all, we without going to the fact, we have to actually see what's the case study, where it goes, derive the value, and then we can put it across. Okay, this is what it is. Then
Okay.
it's up to the client whether to select or not.
Yeah. So even if the client tells you what is the valuation he expects, you can be still impartial, true, and fair in whatever you're valuing. Okay.
Definitely,
Now
sir.
let me just ask Kaushik Raj. Kaushik, now we're talking of only assets. There's no mention of liabilities here.
Yes.
So what do you
Yeah.
think? Why are we supposed to value liabilities also?
Depends upon the because when we take the true value, it becomes to see whether the net worth, like the other previous person has told, the net worth of the company becomes important to negate the liabilities and understand the actual worth of the company. That
Okay.
is, the liabilities would come into picture. Otherwise,
Okay, yeah. So, but Kaushik, when we are referring to you saw previously that we're referring to assets, net worth,
Yeah.
or liabilities. But here,
Yeah.
when we are looking at the appointment of valuers, we are talking of impartial and true valuation, fair valuation of any assets which may require to be valued. There's no mention of liabilities. There's no mention of net worth. Okay, so I think the point which we have to keep in mind is probably implied in this that liabilities are also included. Okay, just
Okay.
keep that in mind. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Now,
Hello,
next is
sir.
yes.
I have one thing. Hello, the impartial value that they are planning to refer, arm's length price. That's what I think. So that it's also being discussed in other places also. The impartial refers to arm's length.
Yeah, you're right, Surya Narayan. I think that was Surya, right? Okay. So, if I'm correct, Surya, you were speaking just now, right?
Correct.
Okay, right. I think you're right. Arm's length price is what we need. Now, let me move on to this point of exercise due diligence while performing the functions as the valuer. So, Rajkumar, can you just tell me, are you a chartered accountant, cost accountant, company secretary?
Yeah. I've attended, sir. I've attended the previous session, fourth batch.
So
Just
you
a refresher course.
refresher for you, and you're probably going to call me out on some of the questions. So don't let go some of my secrets, Raj. So, okay. So due diligence while performing functions as valuer. Let me ask you this question. So what does due diligence entail?
Can you repeat the question?
What does due diligence mean when exercising functions as a valuer?
Due diligence is about verifying whether the documentations are right and the processes required is being followed and necessary compliance has been made, so that the correct valuations can be arrived at.
Okay, right. Okay, so next we'll make the valuation in accordance with rules as may be prescribed. So we have to go to the rules for finding out what the rules prescribe, and also the fourth point: not undertake valuation of any assets in which he has a direct or indirect interest and become so interested at any time during a period of 3 years prior to his appointment as a valuer, or 3 years after the valuation was conducted by him. Let me just see, there is a number of comments in the chat box. So I think that, I think there's nothing much for me right now. Okay, so let me ask this question of Sampath Kumar. Not undertake valuation of any assets in which he has a direct or indirect interest. What is the reason behind this, Sampath?
The reason behind this is we may have mutual interest in that.
Mm-hmm.
That is the reason.
Okay.
Because we have to give the report impartially.
Mm-hmm. And you can't do it if there's a conflict of interest.
Yes, sir.
Right. But suppose you're not holding anything at that point of time. You go and do the valuation. You realize this is a great company in which to invest. And even though I'm doing it at a fair valuation, I've done it absolutely fairly, absolutely perfectly.
But even though we have some information about the company regarding what the value and all, so we cannot do that.
You have inside information.
Yes, sir.
Which may not be publicly known. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Right. So for a period of 3 years prior or 3 years after, he cannot become so interested. Okay. Let's move on now. Now, if the valuer contravenes the provisions of this act, of this section, or the rules made thereunder, the valuer shall be punishable with a fine.
Sir,
which shall
I have
not.
A question to ask in the previous point. When you say one cannot be interested, does it really mean that you can't invest in that particular stock for a period of 3 years prior and post, for which the valuation is being done by the valuer?
Yeah, that's right. So this is Rajat.
That's
Okay.
right.
So Rajat, you are absolutely right. And this is always a constraint when I do a lot of startup company valuations. And if I have to take the call beforehand, is this a company in which I'm likely to be interested as an investor at some point of time? In which case, I'll stay away from valuations. And in case I believe that if I'm okay with not investing in the company, okay, I'll go ahead and do valuations. It may be a great company otherwise. Some of my clients are great companies. I've done their valuations, but I just have to be conscious of the fact that I should not invest in that company, should not have been an investor in that company 3 years prior, or 3 years after that, I don't invest in it after I've done the valuation. So that's a constraint. Okay.
And
I've
any
answered your
specific
question partially.
rationale, any rationale behind this? Because normally, you know, whenever valuation is done, that valuation is
Sorry to
also
interrupt,
made
sir.
public,
Sorry to interrupt.
right? And you know
Sorry
that
to interrupt.
information.
Yeah, who's that? Or just hold
Sir,
on.
this is
Rajat.
Mohan Kumar. Mohan, sorry, can you go to the previous slide, sir, so that we can go through it?
Okay, so let me just get Rajat's question first, and then we'll come back to you. Okay, Rajat, what's the question? Tell me. Rajat, carry on with the question, and then I'll just go back to the previous slide.
Sure. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So what I wanted to know, normally, you know, when the valuation is done, and if the valuation is also made public, for that matter, and it's available for public at large, most of the time, even in stocks also, you know, where there is any information which is available to public at large and everybody can invest basis that information, then, you know, even employees of the companies are also allowed to invest, you know, after that period is over. You know. Then what is the purpose of this specific restriction, and that too for a 3 years period?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's take a situation of a company where I believe that it's got a great future. Okay, and I want to get invested into that company just to sort of indicate that I am doing things on a completely arm's length basis. I just don't invest in it for about a year. Okay, but I know I undervalue that company. Instead of valuing it at, let us say,
to tell you here, it's completely talking about the independence. If you have any interest in the property or interest in the valuation, probably the arm's length price cannot be arrived. Moreover, we are losing the independence.
So that's right. So Rajat's question is that, Rajat's question is more like, okay, at the point of time we've had arm's length independence, we've done all of that, everything has been done perfectly, it's impartial, there's due diligence, everything has been done. Now, why should I not be able to invest in that company? It's a very common sense question. I found a company which is worth investing in, why can't I invest in it? Okay, so, right, this is your question, Rajat.
That's right.
Right. So basically the point is that is, you know for yourself that everything is fine, that you've done a perfect job, you've been at arm's length, you've done everything with due diligence, you've been impartial, true, fair, everything has been done by you. But the whole world at large does not know. Okay, I think that's basically the point here. It has to not only be at arm's length and impartial, true, fair, it also has to appear like that to anybody who's using your report. And if anybody who's using your report realizes, okay, he's gone and bought the shares of the company, they'll immediately assume that there is something which is underhand. Okay, so you can't allow that to happen. I think that's the intention here, Rajat.
Okay. Understood.
Right, let's move on. If a valuer contravenes the provisions of the section or the rules made thereunder, the valuer shall be punishable with fine, which shall not be less than 25,000 rupees, but which may extend to 1 lakh rupees. Provided that if the valuer has contravened such provisions with the intention to defraud the company or its members, he shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 1 year, and with fine which shall not be less than 1 lakh rupees, but which may extend to 5 lakh rupees. Okay, so this is the prime section here for the fines. And in case there is intent, then you can see that the amount of the fine is higher. Not less than 1 lakh, but which may extend to 5 lakh rupees. In case there is no intent, there is 25,000 rupees, which may extend to 1 lakh rupees. Okay. Moving on, where a valuer has been convicted under subsection 3, he shall be, let me just ask a question. Can you see my cursor on the screen, or you can't see this cursor?
Yeah, we can see.
We can.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay. Where a valuer has been convicted under subsection 3, he shall be liable to refund the remuneration received by him to the company and pay for damages to the company or to any other person for loss arising out of incorrect or misleading statement of particulars made in his report. Okay. So it's not only refund the remuneration, but pay damages to the company or any other person for loss arising out of incorrect or misleading statements of particulars made. Now here, let me ask, I'm calling out the names of people whom I can see on screen. So there are some people who I will just go to a different view later and call them out. But for the moment, let me ask Anand Krishnan. See here it says pay for damages to the company. Now the valuer is appointed by the company. There is a loss which has been incurred. So the company can claim damages. But who is this? Any other person? What do you think that means, Anand Krishnan?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah. So who does this refer to? Any other person?
Yeah, any other person means any stakeholder or whoever it may be other than the company, maybe a shareholder or maybe a third party who has relied on your valuation report.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So
those
how do you know?
Can be treated as any other person.
So how do you know who's relying on your report?
Not only the company, but anybody who has depended on your report and acted upon that, and he subsequently he might have made a loss. So that person also can ask for the damages.
Okay, right. So that's a fair explanation. Now, Ananda, you are chartered accountant, cost accountant.
Yeah, I'm a chartered accountant from Bangalore.
Okay. Okay,
yes,
good. You enjoy the morning showers, I think.
Yeah, today, and also we had a power cut in the morning.
Okay, power cut plus showers.
Both we experienced.
Okay, so let me just go
Where
to.
Where are you from, Abraham?
I'm from Bangalore itself. So I'm at JP Nagar in South Bangalore.
Okay.
So I've also had the same interesting weather. Okay, let me ask Jigar, who has a question. What's the question, Jigar?
Sir, normally when there are appointment letters as regards the valuation, they say in case of any damages, it is restricted to the extent of remuneration. This is what normally they write in the appointment letter. But section does not say any limitation on this.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So just limiting in the appointment letter can absolve ourselves from the liability?
Well, we are trying to do it, but our liability is actually defined by the section. So,
exactly, sir.
Yeah, what we try to do in our appointment letters is that we say that the limit of a liability is the amount of fees which I have received under this engagement letter. So refund the remuneration received by him to the company, that is refund of remuneration. That's one thing. But we also claim in our letter that our liability is limited. So suppose there are damages which are there, which are claimed by the person. Now, in law, there is a concept of direct damages, there's indirect damages. For the moment,
yes,
let us be at a very basic level and say that, let's assume for the moment that these are all direct damages. Okay. So these are damages which are incurred because I've relied on this report. I've invested in that company. I've made a loss. Okay. So that's a direct damage.
Correct.
Now, however, the question point which I think Anand Krishnan made is that any other person for loss arising out of incorrect or misleading statement of particulars. Now, to restrict our liability, we need to define who are the people who can use this report. And the people who can use this report should be, let us say, for instance, we are doing a valuation for the purpose of a bank. We should say that the only people who can rely on this is the bank, nobody else. The company cannot use this report and give it to other investors. So for instance, when I do valuation reports under 62(1)(c), which is preferential allotment of shares, I restrict it to the users of this report are only the company, and it cannot be used as a basis for getting fresh investors into the company. But what most of us know is that in actual fact, what the company does is it takes our valuation report and shows it to prospective investors and says that this is the valuation of the company. This is how much independent valuers think it's worth. And therefore, if you want to invest, please go ahead and invest. But I've limited my liability by saying that nobody else can rely on it. Okay. So here, is there anybody who wants to add a point? Let me just find a person if nobody answers.
Yeah, I would like to add some things there.
Yeah, who's this?
I'm Surya Narayan.
Yeah, Surya Narayan, carry on.
Sir, we are making it very, very clear in the report who is going to be the user of the report. If some person beyond that, he cannot claim the damages. We have to spell very clearly the purpose, the object, the user very clearly. Therein, we are restricting our liability.
Right. We are doing that. We do that in our reports. But this section says pay for damages to the company or any other person for loss arising out of incorrect or misleading statement of
We are mentioning the report is for X, Y, Z. A cannot come and claim the damages.
Correct.
We are restricting it very clearly.
Yeah, that's
if
clear.
Damages from X, Y, Z, then it's okay.
Yeah.
So whenever we prepare the valuation, we have to think all the points of X, Y, Z. We know the object, we know the purpose. That we have to take into consideration for valuing X or Y. That's more important.
Right.
Somebody other than the bracket cannot come and ask some damages later point of time.
You're right. You're correct about that. Okay. So is there any other comment from somebody?
Sir, I just have one thing to add, Gajendra here.
Yes, Gajendra.
Sir, just now, like what my colleague said, if other party cannot come and claim damages at any given point of a time, then what is the validity of subclause 2 of subsection 4, sir? Then why would they include the word any other person if that is the case?
Yeah, so any person who relies on it, which
Correct.
is why you have to be very careful in your report to restrict the use of your report to only the people whom you believe have asked you for the report and for the specific purpose for which the report is supposed to be used. See, because it cannot be something which is addressed to the public at large. Basic point being that, all of you know that as per the law of contract, there is a privity of contract. And I think that, let me stop for a moment. I think Tushar was also making this point about privity of contract. Tushar, why don't you speak up about that point?
Sir, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, sir. Can we put a disclaimer clause in our engagement letter and this can be avoided?
Yes, I think that we have to put disclaimer clauses in our, see, first and foremost,
or even in the report.
Yeah, see, first and foremost, we have to restrict the use of our report. It's not a disclaimer.
Yeah.
It is a restriction in the use of the report.
Yeah,
this
that's
report
true.
is meant for ABC and not for XYZ or anybody else. Only for ABC.
Yes.
Okay. So that's, I think, the first and most important thing in the report.
Yeah.
And the privity of contract, which is what you mentioned, is that there is privity of contract. Suppose, Tushar, you've asked me to give you a valuation report and I've given it to you and I've said that this is only for your use.
Yeah.
Anandakrishnan cannot come and file suit against me under the law of contracts.
Yeah.
Saying that he has relied because he is a third party. He has nothing to do between you and me. Why is he getting into the privity of contract as per the Contract Act? He can't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sir, one more question. So I am associated with Merchant Banker, and we are doing some valuations for the this dissemination board and companies who are getting delisted. In that, some of the shareholders are questioning the valuations. So this report is being given to the company or the exchange, but the shareholders are taking some whatever may be the points, but they are always complaining that you have valued or undervalued the company. How to avoid this kind of situation?
Okay, so Tushar, let me just say that this is something, let me not prejudge, let me not come into the area of legal cases just now.
No, not legal, sir. It's on the basis of they complain to the share stock exchange and SEBI and something like that.
Yeah, I understand, Tushar. See, I have an answer to your question, which is basically that as far as delisting of companies is concerned, there is case law here. Okay?
Yeah.
There is case law which has been where SEBI has followed a certain approach. It has appointed valuers, it's appointed additional valuers. It has done everything to arrive at the right price, but still the shareholders have gone to court. And there is case law which says that what is it that needs to be done in a valuation under SEBI?
Yeah.
Case law in valuation under SEBI says that you have to follow the rules outlined by SEBI, first and foremost.
Yes.
Secondly, it also says that you have to follow due process. If you follow due process, court will not intervene.
Okay.
Okay. That's basically what happens in this. But
Yeah.
this is something which you will cover under case law sections when one of the other people is taking it on. And I
Okay.
suggest that you actually raise this question because it's a very good case law which is there for this.
Yeah. Okay.
So you raise it at that point.
Okay, we'll do that. Okay.
Yeah. Now, Dwarkanath, disclaimer is not allowed, but restriction, yeah, I think this is what I mentioned. But is there something which you, Dwarkanath, you were also talking of privity of contract. So is there anything else which you want to add here?
Yeah, so the privity contract not only is between the two parties who are at engagement, it also extends to the people who have been affected under the law of torts. The law of torts, it extends even the third parties. Third parties are also who are have interest in that this one company or transaction can show the value. Okay, right. I think
you're
that
right.
is only a limited extent as per the judicial precedents.
Yeah,
I think
so
people.
Dwarkanath, are you a company secretary?
I'm a triple qualified.
You're okay. Yeah. You're everything. You're all of them. Okay. So you're right. Under law of torts, I think what you mentioned, there is an interesting case where a person keeps a wild animal on his farm, and that wild animal escapes from the confines of the farm and goes and attacks somebody else. Now, is he liable under law of torts? Now, he is liable because any person in that position would have reasonably known that a wild animal could have escaped from his farm and could have gone and killed somebody else. Okay, so that's law of torts.
Yes,
right now, we've covered only law of contracts. However, let me just come back to your point is absolutely valid. Under law of torts, there could be a tortious liability which is there, which is a fair point to make. Okay, but let me ask now, Sindhu Hegde, let me ask you a question back to you. Is there a limitation of time on the issue of a valuation report? Sindhu, what do you think? Sindhu, can you answer? You can say what you think, and then I'll just step in and tell you what is the. I can't see Sindhu's screen. So I'm just wondering whether Sindhu was saying that do we have to spend so much time on this, or do we have to move on, or is it there is a limitation to the valuation report? Let me assume she was talking about.
Hello.
Yeah,
sorry, I got cut because of some network issue.
Okay.
My query was the time limit for any valuation report that we actually issue, and till when it would be considered valid, and till when it would be questionable.
Okay, so I think all of you know that as per valuation report, we have, and we'll get into this a little bit more in detail when we go to the other parts, that there is a certain date, a valuation date. Let us say I'm doing a valuation of company as of 31st of March. So that is the valuation date. There's a report date. I'm doing the report as of today, 24th of April. So there's a report date which is there. Now, the question which Sindhu is asking is that, can I say in my report on 24th of April that I'm restricting the validity of this report for 3 years and not thereafter? Okay, that's not possible. As of the valuation date, as of my valuation report date of today, it is valid. Now, I cannot say that it's not going to be valid after 3 years, because on that date, that was the value. And in perpetuity, that's the value. Now, just think of all the companies. I valued companies pre-COVID. And now, because of COVID, the valuations, would have likely dropped because they are going to be making losses. Does it in any way mean that the valuation of the company on that date on which I valued has changed? It has not changed. On that date, that was the value. Okay, that's basically.
So my question is, say 3 years later, somebody comes and questions your valuation was, contravening the provisions of the Act or whatsoever. Would it still be valid to, kind of go back into the valuation that was done probably on a particular date 3 years back?
Yeah, it was valid on that date. It was valid on that date. Now, Dwarkanath has probably referred to the law of limitation. Okay, yeah. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay, so under law of limitation, I think he's trying to say that under the law of limitation, there's a 3-year limitation. But that I think you cover in your legal. Let me carry on with our presentation. Okay.
Can we think of two things, sir? Valuation date and reporting date. As said by you, your valuation date is 31st of March 2020. But you are submitting report on, say, today. Can we think of the impact?
Yeah, so as of valuation date, there is a certain value to the, I've taken financials up to that date, I've taken projections after that. Now, between the intervening period of 31st March and 24th of April, if there is some circumstances which would have changed the value, I would consider them and I will put them into my report. Okay, that's all. But as of today, based on my best judgment, this is the value. And it refers to valuation date. Okay, now let me go to this question and let me just figure out who's the participant to ask here. Let me ask Pramendra Gupta. Pramendra Gupta, can you tell me what's the answer to this? Pramendra, will you be able to take up this answer? Unless.
What's the question, sir?